Might be sorry.
Well, hello everybody. How you doing? Bettina, how are you?
Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. How are you doing? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I think it's funny that that we catch that little audio clip as we open the show because yeah, we're getting to air a little bit late because we've been just chatting it up before the show, and I had an idea for the show today about focusing on the things you do want as opposed to the things that you don't want, or not focusing on the things you want to not deal with or manifest or have energy of in your life. But we started getting talking. I had like a kind of a major life moment yesterday, and so I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I went and completed and had done a vasectomy, and I'm 37 with no kids for anybody who's come across this video for the first time, and it's we were just chatting about it because it's interesting, and not too often do people just talk about it openly, and I think it's really powerful to talk about it openly, and I also think it's really powerful, as Bettina was saying before the show, when you talk to somebody who doesn't have the same views, or when Bettina says, right from the time she was young, she wanted to have kids, and it's so to have somebody who's relatively young for the procedure and was asking me questions about doctors asking me whether I wanted it done, or was there any sort of regulation for you to prove that this is what you wanted? Because it's interesting, and I think it's really interesting to talk about. And when I was researching, which I researched a lot because it's a
Because you're a
major life
five.
decision. Yeah, exactly. Because I'm a five, and it's also a major life decision, and it's relatively permanent, um, and also because they would be, it's a minor surgery, but it's in a very vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of research, but I didn't see a lot of there was a lot of like medical answers, like to questions about will affect like my testosterone production, what happens, where does stuff go, what's no longer connected, and so a lot of like technical scientific answers to questions that people were posing, whether it be on Quora or wherever, Yahoo Answers, or just looking it up in Google, and there's a lot of information that way. But in all my research, I realized that there was something that came up, and perhaps it's out there, perhaps it's more obscure, perhaps if I researched it really specifically and was determined, because sometimes you can type in a question and it doesn't come up on the first page, and you kind of give up because it's like, oh well, I guess I got to dig for it, and it may not be perfectly relevant. But there
Mhm.
was really nothing that came up in the top of searches about men having an honest conversation about the emotional aspect to it, or the decision making that goes into it, or the emotional feelings you feel, not only in the when you make the appointment and you move towards it, and then in the moments before, you can kind of run still. And so I that's kind of we just decided to throw this up and to talk about it, and I think it would be it would have been useful to me, even though I was, my mind's made up, and it's been a decision that I've considered for a long time. It's something that I would have found useful in my own research, and so here it is. We'll put this out here, and hopefully it shows up in somebody's search down the road who is thinking about doing it, and not just thinking about doing it because they've had 4 kids and they're 51, and they wouldn't want another surprise. More so for a lifestyle decision, and it's also a decision that is becoming more and more. It's a growing decision amongst my generation and the generation below me, to decide to not have children in their life, or at least not have biological children, and that comes up. That comes up in my thought process a lot too. But we'll get to that. So starting the show like that, I'll pass it off to you, Bettina. I know that you were asking me a little bit about the difference in mindset, because it's something that you've always wanted to do, is have children, and you did, and it's
Mhm.
something that it's never been an idea that's grabbed me for myself.
Well, okay. So, actually, one thing that struck me when you were talking about it just now was that it's such a great symbol of a man being at his most vulnerable.
Hmm.
Like it's such a great representation of the height of vulnerability for a man is to um, to be have surgery on that particular area of their body is a very physically vulnerable thing to have to go through. But I think the way men deal with it also represents how they deal with their emotional vulnerability as well. It's like, you have a stiff upper lip and, carry on, and you don't talk about it to people. You either say, and I said this earlier, is you either say, oh yeah, well, my wife sent me down, told me that's it. We've got 4 kids. Time to get the snip snip. And that's about all that ever occurs in a conversation between men, from what I understand. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But I just don't see yet that men sit down and say, well, geez, how do you feel about that? Like, sure, you got 4 kids, but, it's a big decision. Or, as you said, you're a young man. It's a big decision. How are you feeling about it emotionally? It just doesn't seem like something that men would discuss. Like other emotional vulnerabilities, men tend to be a little bit reluctant to share, especially with other men. I think they'd be more willing to share with their partner than they would with their buddies. So that was the first thing. And then I said before the show how it raises my curiosity, and I've never really had the opportunity or the opening to talk to someone who has a different perspective from me, without being afraid of being insulting or disrespecting them, or them feeling that I was being a little bit too invasive in their personal life. So, yes, I'm curious, and I have questions about all sorts of things. I mean, the physical part of it is I get the basics, so I don't really need the education on that. But just to really, because most of my life was about being a mother. Not that I didn't do other things, but I think that was my main focus. Is I felt like I watched my little brother and sister when I was quite young, and it gave me a very nice sense of fulfillment to be able to do that. Like I loved babies. I loved children. I still do. I still would, spend my time with children as much as possible. But yes, I've always wanted to be a mother. And I think I've been very entrenched in that desire, until the time that I was. And it was everything that I thought it would be and wanted it to be. But I do wonder why and how different people come to that sort of decision to not want to have children. Because I've faced it with my own kids too. They don't seem to have that much of a desire to have children. And so I'm curious about how that comes to be, that decision sort of takes shape.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off the top, I mean, thank you for the kind words about how it is really, and you are at your most vulnerable. I mean, guys, and this is something that's not really talked about. It can be joked about, but we have I'm sure it's the same as women. This is actually something that I'm actually quite naive about, but we have a relationship with our member, I guess. I don't want to get too crass with the vocabulary, but it's something that you discover when you're a child, and especially through perhaps maybe some of the more toxic ways that masculinity is kind of expressed to you in culture and society, and the subculture of men dealing with men. The false toughness of everything. It's something that you have. It's very dear to you, of course, and so yeah, being at complete vulnerability with the tools of surgery and local anesthetic going on. Certainly, there's a lot of fear there about what happens with that, and also a deep down ancestral desires, can be affected by something going wrong. Um, so yeah, it definitely is, and amongst like even talking to men who, because I was quite open in my lead up to it, because I think it's an interesting conversation. I also think it's very interesting to state that I'm going to get a vasectomy when I knew like 4 months ago. I would say it, and to watch people's reaction to it, in part from what you shared earlier about how it's interesting. Not too often do people share it, but also because I am a little bit more on the younger side of the spectrum to have it done. And that was expressed to me not only by the healthcare professionals, but also like to watch the people's reaction, both in support and to people who that ruffled their feathers a little bit. And I thought it was really interesting to just be open about it. But in so doing, I met, or some men would say, "Oh, I've had it done," or so on. It's actually a lot of men have had it done, but you just wouldn't necessarily know it. They just don't bring it up. And so I think that's always interesting, being the kind of person I am, to run to do this show and to try to be open and have open conversations about the inner workings of life. And typically it's just brought up about a joke. It's like it's a joke, or it's the physical part of it is the reference. It's like, oh, they'll either say, "Oh, it wasn't that bad, it was certainly tender, but I drove myself home and I'm not supposed to, ha ha ha," or they make a joke about it. But really, there was no, in all my opportunities leading up to it, which may have only been about a dozen or so of men I spoke to privately or semi-privately, that it was happening. Nobody talked about the emotional side of it, or nobody gave any counsel even to me about what you might go through, or nobody really asked how you're feeling leading up to it. It's actually a question that was asked more by women who I express myself with, but not to men. So yeah, you're definitely on about that. I think the big thing for how coming to that decision is, so much of what this show is about, so much of what my ethos, or my mantra for life is really, we have so much expectation placed on us by the society we live in, naturally so. Things should be orderly, and where people can't make decisions for themselves, they should be guided in a way that benefits everybody. So if you don't make a decision for yourself, at least you go to work and contribute 40 hours a week to the betterment of society, and we'll pay you a little bit of money for that. So if you don't really think about what you want to do, following the standard is set there and reinforced in many ways, both honorably and dishonorably, for you to fall into line if you haven't thought about something just yet. And so my big thing about life is to where you are capable to stop yourself. Like you always say, I love this all the time. It comes up on almost every other show, is create the gap. Say, hang on a second. Why am I doing the things I'm doing? Why am I working towards a future that I am? Does it serve me? Does it not serve me? Is there a better way? And then sit with it. And hopefully you can do this as early as possible. And when I coach kids, when I mentor kids, it's almost always young men. It's really kind of at the core of my message to them is really a pointing towards self-awareness. And if you can sit with it and think about what it is you want for your life, and if it fits, then great, continue along the path, shake yourself out of it and go along your way. But I think what you'll find that really nothing bad happens from that. There might be some short-term discomfort if you realize that you've invested time and effort and money and commitments into something that you actually don't want. There might be some short-term pain in that, but ultimately your life's going to be better as a result. So there's really no bad part about pulling yourself out, creating a gap, and thinking about what it is that you really want in life, and not only what you really want, but also to figure out some self-awareness. And it's not so much as like catching yourself in bad habits. It's more so understanding the kind of person you are, whether that is obvious to you, or whether you kind of have to overlay your repeated behaviors on top of each other to really see a pattern of, why don't I like doing these things? And why do I like doing these other things? And what does that say about me? What is it saying about my natural disposition? What is it saying about my natural motivations about life? And it's why on this show we talk so much about personality tests, whether it be Myers-Briggs, whether it be the Enneagram. For anybody who watches more than an episode of this show, they know it's a core. It's a core system of education that we work off of because it helps us know ourselves better. One of the best gifts from it is that it helps you understand the reason why you do something and why the reason you've done similar things like this in the past. And it also allows you to love yourself. And then you can extrapolate out and you can see the other people in your life as being different combinations of personality traits, and allows you to feel love for them and acceptance for them. Because so much of what conflict is with ourselves and with others is this uh, not accepting ourselves and not accepting somebody else. Why do they always do that? And you kind of want to change their behavior, and you almost want to change your own behavior, and it causes this dissonance and frustration and anxiety, and it causes you to produce results you don't even want, and sometimes results that are, many times results that are subpar through self-sabotage, and results that are contrary to what you actually want out of your what seemingly is one life. To the best of our knowledge, we only get one. And so part of this work has led me down the path of eventually making this decision, among many others in my life. And the Myers-Briggs, I think, is a big one because I'm an INFP, but my P is like off the charts, almost 100, from 0 to 100. And the P is a prospector, somebody who, and I know this about myself. I mean, I love baseball. I love competition. I love sports. I love learning. But I couldn't do any of those things 8 hours a day, and it would drive me crazy. And I know from being in school how horrible that experience was for me. By about lunchtime, I just couldn't stand being there anymore. And it wasn't that I didn't like learning. It wasn't that I didn't like school. It wasn't like I didn't like the sports there, the people, or the socializing. I just couldn't sit there for 8 hours, and I couldn't do the same thing for 7 hours. And so my own self-awareness, I know that I need to do many things in my day and in my life. And some people, the opposite of that is a J, somebody who can do one task and be content and do some things from start to finish and stay on task. And there's somebody who's much more amenable to routine. And so just even that plays a part into my decision, because I'm not going to live a life. My best lived life is not one that's conducive to raising dependent children for 20 years. There is very few jobs out in today's economy or marketplace that where I can work part-time and maintain the benefits I need that would be responsible of me to have if I'm going to have one or more children. It's pretty difficult that if I have a cobble work income system, or the way that I make money, none of my jobs have benefits, so we'd always be on the hook. That would put pressure on my partner to do it. And honestly, I don't want to spend the time and the requirement and the maintenance to have children, particularly little children. And it's always been something that I've known. And so I love kids. I love being with kids. I love mentoring kids. And there's lots of areas in society where I can do that. And that was really a calming, maybe we'll get into it, maybe we won't on this show, about the minutes before I was going to go have this procedure, because it's basically permanent. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, do I really, really know that I don't want to? And then for a minute or two, I was a little bit nervous. I was actually, no, that's not fair. It would be like a 6 or a 7 on the nervous out of 10. And then so I took the time, meditated in my little stall that I was getting naked in, minus my shoes, and really thought, like, okay, what, looking into myself, what thoughts or so on can I have that's going to help me feel good about this decision, or making the decision to postpone it. And one of them for me was that, I've done Big Brothers. I've done their one-on-one match, and I've done their in-school mentoring, and I love it. And I've done coaching, and I've had, special kids, just kids you have a bond with, who you really like for one reason or another. They're not even always the best kids or whatever. They just match with your personality, and you have relationships that extend beyond. And I always thought, what really suits my personality is that big brother kind of relationship, where on every Tuesday I pick them up. We go out for 5 hours. We have a great time. We have deep talks. I push, life and thought and feelings and talking with a man about, what's going on the inside with the challenges of life. And then I like dropping them back off and then going about my day and doing a little bit of something else the rest of the night, doing something different tomorrow morning. And if I were to be a father, in particularly, I wouldn't be able to live the natural cadence of my life. And I can do a lot more good, and we all can, I think, whether it be with this decision or work or what have you, when we set up our life, when we have that self-awareness about ourselves. And that's a real strong motivation. Why I say that my P is almost 100, where I really need this in my life to be happy, to really feel relaxed almost. Some people would be like, oh my God, how can you do this job for 3 hours, take 2 hours off, do this project for 45 minutes, do this show, upload it, then go work at a restaurant and serve, and then tomorrow morning go and work on a home with your maintenance business. Most people are like, that's crazy. I would never want to do that. But for me, it's like I need that to be relaxed. And that's not conducive to the massive Cadillac commitment of having a child. And it's also really not conducive to a partner who would want to have kids, that I'm all over the place at all different hours. And I can bring my best self to the world if I can contribute, because I want to contribute in a way that works for me. And I can bring 100% engagement, excitement, enthusiasm to projects that match my natural rhythm, that match my natural cadence. And so biologically fathering my own children doesn't fit into that at all. But I've done it, and I will do it again. And I can even see myself having multiple little brothers, or coaching in the future, where I get to go there for 4 hours, give it 100%, then go home and stay up to 3 a.m. doing something else that I want to do, doing some introvert learning thing, or whether it's competing online in some online competition. That's my best life. And so it's important to make these decisions and create your life from the blueprint of the person you are, with no judgment, with no like, oh, I should be a father. Shouldn't I be more responsible? Shouldn't I try to climb the corporate ladder? Shouldn't I, let that stuff go. If you're being lazy, if you can, and that suits you, and you're just not because you're lazy, and that's a problem. But most people really aren't lazy out of a lack of desire to contribute and commit themselves to something that they're good at and something that they can become better at. It's mostly because people are lazy, is because they're resisting the foundation, or the system of life that they don't jive with, and they're actually resisting things that they have to do in the way that they have to do it. And so if you remove those things, you can be really productive with your life. You can be really content. You can be really engaged every moment that you live. And I think that's a life best lived. And so doing this plays into that for me. And if you're like me, if this is resonating with you, if you come across this video for the first time you've ever seen this show, if any of that resonates with you, then, it's nice to hear and have a little bit of encouragement to take a time out and think about what it is you are, and then how to build your life out from that without judgment. You don't have to do anything. The only thing you have to do is make more money than you spend, so that you're not a burden, so that you actually contribute, leave this place better than when you got here. That's really the only thing you have to do. There's lots of ways to do that. So I think there's a long answer. But it's a very difficult question.
Yeah. And well, I didn't want to ask the easy one. It's interesting, though, because I think it's just as brave a decision not to have children for the right reasons than to have children for the right reasons. Also, I think the other way around, it's just as easy a cop-out not to have children for the wrong reasons, or to have children for the wrong reasons. Either way, if you're not doing it mindfully, if you're not doing it with a sense of self-awareness, then it can be a problem. It can really be a problem. There can be resentment, there can be guilt, there can be regret, all sorts of different things. And so I think your answer was amazing, because it came with a great and deep sense of self-awareness, wherein you know yourself enough to know, to look forward and to see it from the end point and to recognize it wasn't going to be a good thing for you, and because of that, for whatever child or children you may have. So I think that's really important. And I think men need to have people that they can talk to in this manner from that point of self-awareness. And if they're not self-aware enough, to talk to someone who can guide them into their self-awareness so that they can make these types of huge, huge life decisions from that place. I think there'd be a lot more happier people around on
Yeah.
both sides of the argument. So I think it was a great answer. It was a great
Well,
answer, and I hope it can help somebody. So, did you get a lot of comments from people when you broached the subject?
yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, they keep their distance too because they're polite. Most people are polite, and most of the circles, the people that I deal with, are very like socially skilled. I am I spend a lot of time alone, and in my job, it's my business. I'm alone a lot, but my job at the restaurant, I'm with, generally speaking, I'm with highly socialized people. They get hired for that reason. So they would ask, and sometimes they would go take the first question and be like, "Whoa, like are you really sure? It's a big decision," and really they wouldn't press on it.
Mm-hmm.
My dad and I have had lots of conversations on this topic, almost to the point where it's become a joke. Because I did try to counsel with him, and what does life look like as a 58-year-old male? What does life look like as a 63-year-old male?
Mm-hmm.
You know, am I making and I'm certainly somebody who doesn't like to lock myself down to any commitment beyond, like I wouldn't want 24-year-old me making decisions for 38-year-old me. I mean, that guy was a dumbass.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine 52-year-old me will say the same thing about this guy right on camera right now. So I'm certainly cognizant of not making sweeping decisions
Mm-hmm.
that would tie down my future self. Um,
But
but
also, I think it's a good idea to see it from the end point forward, backwards, I guess, from the end point backwards. In other words, seeing yourself as a 65-year-old and, seeing yourself as a childless 65-year-old, seeing yourself as a 65-year-old with children, and then working your way back through all those different stages. I think that's a really good way of looking at it because, it just gives you a chance to sort of picture what your life would be with or without. And I think that can sometimes be the thing that some people may need to, um, to tip the scales in one way or the other. Um, because again, you don't want to be filled with regret later
yes,
on too, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, a good way to alleviate that is to see it from the end point forward, backward, whatever, however you want to look at it. It's
And,
perspective.
and and that probably was the one thing that kept me from doing it even earlier was, do I really know what it's like to be 58 and childless as a male? Because
Mm-hmm.
even though my father was really supportive with the decision, he says that he without making too much business, but it's something that he would consider having to do his life over again. It wouldn't be just a obvious yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and But the more that I thought about it, the more it's like, yes, I mean, there's nothing that can, I'll even though I've never experienced it, I can acknowledge and say there's nothing like having your own children and the bond and the connection you'll have, and family is forever. And of course, in a relationship that lasts 40 years, especially when the one half of them is super selfish for the first 20 years, like carte blanche, and the adult can be very selfish too, and there's conflict. It's still the bond that really is, in most cases, is unbreakable. And even if there is estrangement, there's pain on both sides that there is estrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And But one thing that really that settled me with that was my experience with big brothers. And, you know, I got a little brother when I was 27, 27, and having that experience really helped me because it showed that you can have deep, meaningful relationships. And honestly, life is what you know, you get out of life what you put in. And if I were to continue those relationships and bring value to the world, and bring value to then the generation behind me or half generation behind me, there's no reason why we wouldn't have a meaningful relationship later in life. And you know, with every decision there is consequences. And so yeah, I am giving up, and I'm well aware that I'm giving up the ability to have that biological family, father son, father daughter bond, that for whatever that's worth, I do feel like I can create an adequate substitute, a substitute that I'm comfortable enough with should I want it, which is really what the last thing was for me to um, feel comfortable about before making the decision to go through with this.
Hmm. Yeah, you know, and there's so many, like you said, there's so many other ways to mentor and be a role model for young people. And there are so many young people out there who don't have a good, solid role model or someone that can be supportive to them and sort of give them a bit of guidance and sort of help them through the rough spots. So there's no shortage of you know kids
Hmm.
like that around, and it's great that you will have that time that maybe someone who's a father might not have the extra time
Yeah.
to go and do that for someone else, and maybe their kids have to be grown up before they can even entertain that idea. But to have someone who is a bit younger and you know can still get out and throw the ball around or whatever, I think those kind of roles in society are super, super important. And I think there's really definitely a shortage of that kind of people around, especially with everything that's going on in the world. I mean, it's crazy, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
And almost, oh,
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and almost to one of the points I made earlier about, I don't really think most people are just naturally lazy, or don't want to contribute. I think it's actually almost a human need to contribute, and be meaningful in people's lives. But um, I think it's really so important to try things in life, from an early age, to get out of your not out of your comfort zone so much. I think it's a little bit overstated, but more so just try different things. Think and put yourself in situations that are somewhat conducive to the person you are. And the reason why I bring this up is because I started coaching when I was you know, I played baseball, as everybody in the show knows, and I played it quite competitively. And then when I made the decision to stop pursuing becoming a professional, which I probably had no shot at, but you know, when you're 19 and 20, you know, you just keep working and keep trying. But when I started to coach, I moved the next summer that I didn't play super competitive ball. I still played, but not the everyday 8 hours a day baseball. Um, I started coaching, and that really helped me see how much value I could bring, to kids, not just about baseball, because baseball's useless in life. I mean, it's just a vehicle through which to teach life. Um, but when I was coaching and I wanted to do a good job, to my point, I really wanted to do a good job. I went above and beyond because I was competitive, because I wanted to win for me too. And I wanted to give the gift of winning to kids who haven't won before. Um, and I held more practices than was expected. I got us into more tournaments than what was expected. Um, I put a lot of work into it, and it was in that kind of almost first and second year where I realized that, like, because at that point I'm 21, 22 years old, and still generally on the path of make as much money as possible and raise a family. Um, but it was in those moments when it's kind of an unknown benefit, where it's like, you know what, like if I had a 4-year-old and a newborn, you know, I couldn't do this to this level. I couldn't give 4 nights, 4 hours, 3 nights a week to two practices in the game, or a practice in two games. And I couldn't rent out a batting cage and take 13 kids staggered every half hour, because my resources would be too valuable to my partner, to me making money, to me having a job that wouldn't allow me to be here at 3:45 after the kids are out of school, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do this for the community, for myself, for my own personal uh, meaningful relationships and meaningful achievements. And that really stuck with me a long time. And that really started, along with my reading, to shake me out of the idea like, well, maybe it isn't all about working 55 hours a week, making as much money as I can, and starting a family. Maybe there's something that's, you know, valuable to me that isn't that. And I didn't know what the
Mhm.
final answer to that is, and probably still don't. It's an ongoing present moment conversation you have with yourself about what is you want to do next. Um, but it was wonderful because it showed me, my point being try things, um, and it will sometimes give you life realizations that'll help you think outside the box, because generally speaking, we just swallow all the values and standards set before us by society and our parents. And it was a really important moment in me being able to break free from what would have been a miserable life for me, especially in my mid 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it's, for so many generations, we all went along, and I'm, generation ahead of you, if that's how it works. So my kids are just slightly younger than you. And you just went along and you did what society expected of you. You really didn't think twice about, not getting married and having kids. I mean, it just was, the thing to do. It's what you did next. You got to be this age, and then you got married, and then you got to be this age and you had your kids, and it just went on and on and on. And I think it's great that people are questioning that and recognizing that there are many different definitions of family, and there are many different definitions of parenting, and just from that sort of perspective, um, to question it and to really see how it resonates with us as individuals, as opposed to that herd mentality of you just follow along with the crowd and go in the direction the crowd's going in, and we don't question, we don't self-examine, or even think about having that awareness. I mean, that's kind of new. It's certainly new for me, considering my age. It's the newer part of my life, more so than, I've been in that place for a long time. So yeah, I think it's encouraging, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and it may work out well for you. You may be somebody who will thrive in a situation like that. And by all means, I'm so glad there's so many different kinds of us people in the world, because it helps. There's things that I could just never do that other people do fabulously, that contribute to my well-being, that contribute to the things that I benefit from society from. And
Mhm.
if we're lucky, and the the societal structure right now is conducive to close to a life of really well lived on your part, then that's absolutely fantastic. But we're here to always make improvements, and if we don't fit in
Mhm.
and we kind of know something's wrong, this show is all about giving yourself permission to do something different, but still contribute. And don't be don't be a taker. But I really think that if you set up your situation conducive to the person you are, you're going to contribute naturally, and you're going to do a really good job, and you're going to bring your gifts to bear in society and in your families, and you'll be quite happy with the life that you lived at the end of it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, I know we've gone over time. It's almost a 40-minute
Yeah.
show, which we almost never do. But two
Yeah.
questions, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
I hope it was entertaining enough through it all. But how did you feel about finishing us off with a meditation, Bettina?
Sure.
Wonderful.
Not sure where that'll go, but yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, let's close our eyes and take a deep breath. And as you breathe, lean into that place within you where everything is stripped away. Your identity, the roles you play, the expectations that are on you or that you feel, the heaviness of certain experiences in life. Let them all go at the door and walk into this beautiful and glorious place where you see yourself as you truly are, in that loving expression of the divine love and kindness, compassion. And those are the skills that a parent uses, certainly. And those are the skills that we can all use on a day-to-day basis, whether we are parents in the biological sense, in the adoptive sense, in the sense of being role models or mentors, support persons, no matter what it is. We are all the same in that loving expression, in that compassion, and in that kindness that is at the root of who we are, and that we can find when we walk away from all the worldly suffering and step into this place of loving kindness. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the world.
Thank you, Bettina.
You're welcome.
You know, I love finishing this show off with meditation, and just having the reminder that we can corral our thoughts. And I know how important that was to me when I started to feel nervous, yesterday. And it's such a powerful tool in the toolbox to always be able to take that time out and even give yourself a little mini meditation to, settle your thoughts down. So thank you for that, and reminding us every show how easy, but also how hard it is.
Well, you're welcome. It should be the foundation and the cornerstone of our lives, really, but we sometimes forget that. And
Yeah.
I think it's nice to have a reminder, even for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I always think it's interesting, like not to carry the show on too much further, but just that, meditation sometimes is, it's classified, especially if you're on the fringe and you're not really in it, as like something that's like spiritual or a little bit woohoo and stuff like that. But really, I know that I was meditating before I knew what meditation was. I mean, and it really gets boiled down to be as simply as take 2 minutes to think about what you want, think about what feels good. And that's not spiritual or spiritual woohoo or something silly. It's just, honestly, why go about a day? Why put in 16 hours if you haven't like asked yourself what it is you want and want to be?
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Definitely.
Well, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you all again next week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Hmm.